Samantha had always known her house was old, but she loved its creaky floors and vintage charm. One stormy evening, as rain pounded against the windows, she curled up with a book in the living room. The house was eerily quiet except for the occasional roll of thunder. Suddenly, she heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible noise coming from the basement. At first, she dismissed it as the house settling, but the noise grew louder and more distinct. It was a rhythmic thumping, accompanied by what sounded like whispers. Her heart began to race. She tried to convince herself it was nothing, perhaps a stray animal or the wind. But the sounds persisted, growing more insistent. She grabbed a flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, and made her way to the basement door. Her hand trembled as she turned the knob and slowly descended the creaky wooden stairs. Each step echoed ominously, blending with the strange noises below. As she reached the bottom, the sound stopped abruptly, plunging her into an unnerving silence. She shone the flashlight around the basement, its beam revealing nothing but old furniture and dusty boxes. Just as she was about to turn back, the thumping resumed, louder and more frantic. It was coming from behind a large, ancient-looking wardrobe in the corner. Summoning all her courage, Samantha approached the wardrobe. The whispers grew louder, almost as if they were right behind her. She reached out and pulled the wardrobe door open, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, there was nothing but darkness. She shone the flashlight inside and gasped. There, etched into the back wall of the wardrobe, were words scratched deep into the wood. "Get out before it's too late." Before she could react, a cold hand gripped her shoulder from behind. She spun around, but there was no one there. The whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, and the thumping grew deafening. She dropped the flashlight, plunging the basement into darkness. Samantha ran up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind her. The noises stopped, but the eerie feeling lingered. She never went into the basement again, but on stormy nights, she could still hear the whispers and the thumping, reminding her of the warning etched in the wardrobe. "Get out before it's too late," in the days that followed. Samantha couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. The warning from the basement haunted her thoughts, and every creak of the house sent a shiver down her spine. She considered moving out, but the practical side of her dismissed it as paranoia. One evening, her friend Jack came over. Jack was a skeptic, always rational and down to earth. Samantha confided in him about the basement incident, hoping he could offer a logical explanation. Jack chuckled. "It's an old house, Sam. Probably just a trick of the light and your imagination running wild. Let's go down there and take another look." Reluctantly, Samantha agreed. Armed with flashlights and a renewed sense of determination, they descended into the basement together. The air felt colder than before, and the silence was oppressive. Jack moved the wardrobe away from the wall, revealing the message once more. "Well, that's definitely creepy," he admitted, running his fingers over the deep scratches. "But it doesn't prove anything supernatural." As they examined the wardrobe, a loud bang echoed through the basement. Samantha jumped, her flashlight beam shaking. Jack, trying to appear brave, moved towards the sound. It came from a small door she had never noticed before, half hidden behind stacks of old boxes. "Did you know this was here?" Jack asked, prying the door open. Samantha shook her head, a sense of dread washing over her. The door led to a narrow, dark passageway, the walls lined with cobwebs. "Let's check it out," Jack said, already stepping inside. "Are you crazy?" Samantha hissed. "We should call someone, an expert or the police." "Relax, Sam. If we don't investigate, you'll never have peace of mind," Jack reasoned. With great reluctance, Samantha followed him into the passageway. The further they went, the colder it became. The whispers started again, faint and indistinguishable. The passage seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning, until they reached a small, hidden room. In the center of the room was an old wooden chest. The whispers grew louder as they approached it. Jack knelt down and opened the chest, revealing its contents. Old photographs, letters, and a dusty, leather-bound journal. Samantha picked up the journal and flipped through its pages. The handwriting was barely legible, But the entries detailed a story of a family that had lived in the house over a century ago. They spoke of strange occurrences, mysterious disappearances, and a sinister presence that seemed to inhabit the basement. "Look at this," Samantha said, pointing to a passage. It read, "We tried to leave, but it won't let us. The house, it's alive. It feeds on fear. We must warn whoever comes next." As they read, the temperature in the room plummeted. The whispers turned into cries of agony, and the walls seemed to close in on them. Jack and Samantha exchanged a terrified glance and bolted back through the passageway, the voices following them. They burst out of the basement, slamming the door shut behind them. Panting and wide-eyed, Jack finally believed her. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice shaking. Samantha nodded, already dialing a number on her phone. They left the house that night, vowing never to return. A few weeks later, the house was condemned and scheduled for demolition. As the wrecking ball swung, Samantha stood at a safe distance, watching. She felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The house had held so many memories, but it also harbored dark secrets she was glad to leave behind. Just as the walls crumbled, Samantha thought she saw a shadowy figure in one of the windows. She blinked, and it was gone. The whispers, however, had finally fallen silent. As the dust settled and the house was reduced to rubble, Samantha tried to move on with her life. She found a new apartment in the city, far from the haunted memories of her old home. Jack visited often, helping her adjust and ensuring she wasn't alone. For a while, things seemed to return to normal. However, strange occurrences began to follow her. At night, she would hear faint whispers, almost as if they were carried by the wind through her new apartment. Objects would move on their own, doors would creak open, and shadows would flicker in her peripheral vision. Samantha couldn't escape the feeling that something had followed her. One evening, as she was unpacking a box of old belongings, she found the leather-bound journal from the basement. She had forgotten she had taken it in the rush to leave. Hesitant but curious, she opened it again, hoping to find some clue to put her mind at ease. As she flipped through the pages, she found an entry she had missed before. It described a ritual to cleanse the house of its malevolent spirit, something the previous family had attempted but never completed. The instructions were detailed, involving candles, incantations, and a specific sequence of actions. Desperate for answers, Samantha called Jack. Together, they decided to perform the ritual, hoping it would rid her of the haunting presence once and for all. They gathered the necessary items and waited for nightfall. As the clock struck midnight, they began the ritual. Candles flickered around the room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Samantha read the incantation aloud, her voice trembling. Jack followed the instructions, setting the items in place as described. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and a chilling wind swept through, extinguishing the candles. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the apartment. Samantha and Jack stood their ground, continuing the ritual despite their fear. The shadows in the room began to take shape, forming a dark, menacing figure. It loomed over them, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Samantha felt a surge of fear but pressed on, repeating the final words of the incantation. The figure screamed, a sound so piercing it felt like it would shatter glass. The room shook violently, and for a moment, it seemed as if the apartment would collapse. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything went still. The figure dissolved into a wisp of smoke, and the whispers ceased. Samantha and Jack stood in stunned silence, their hearts pounding. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive presence was gone. They had done it. They had banished whatever had haunted her. Over the next few weeks, the disturbances stopped. Samantha could finally sleep through the night without fear. The journal was locked away, a reminder of the ordeal but also of their triumph. One sunny afternoon, Samantha received a letter in the mail. It was from the construction company that had demolished her old house. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a photograph of the house before it was torn down. Scribbled on the back were the words, "Thank you." Samantha's hands shook as she read the note. She showed it to Jack, who shared her bewilderment. They would never know who had sent it or how they knew about the ritual, but one thing was certain. The house's dark history was finally laid to rest. Life gradually returned to normal, but Samantha never forgot the lesson she had learned. Some places carry memories far beyond what the eye can see, and sometimes those memories need help to find peace. Months passed, and Samantha's life settled into a peaceful routine. The haunting memories of the old house faded gradually, replaced by new experiences and friendships in her city apartment. She found solace in her work and in spending time with Jack, who had become her closest confidant and support. Yet, despite her newfound peace, Samantha couldn't shake a lingering sense of unease. Occasionally, in quiet moments or late at night, she would catch glimpses of shadows moving in the corners of her vision. Whispers, faint and fleeting, would drift through her mind like distant echoes. She tried to dismiss them as remnants of her past trauma, but deep down, she feared the spirit had not been entirely banished. One rainy evening, Samantha received an unexpected visitor at her door. It was an elderly woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. She introduced herself as Mrs. Hawthorne, a neighbor who lived down the hall. "I hope I'm not intruding," Mrs. Hawthorne said softly, "but I've noticed some strange occurrences in the building lately. I couldn't help but wonder if you've experienced anything unusual as well." Samantha hesitated, unsure whether to confide in this new acquaintance. Yet something about Mrs. Hawthorne's presence felt comforting, as if she already knew more than she let on. I have," Samantha admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She recounted the events of the past months, the whispers, the shadows, and the lingering fear that had followed her from her old house. Mrs. Hawthorne listened intently, nodding knowingly. "I suspected as much," she murmured. "You see, this building has its own history, much like your old house. There are spirits here, restless souls who haven't found peace." Samantha's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Hawthorne smiled gently. "I believe you inadvertently brought something with you when you left that house. Spirits can attach themselves to places, but they can also attach themselves to people, especially if there's unresolved energy or a strong connection." Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. "Is there anything we can do?" Mrs. Hawthorne nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, there is. But it will require courage and a willingness to confront the past." Together, they devised a plan. With Mrs. Hawthorne's guidance, Samantha and Jack conducted a series of rituals to cleanse not just her apartment but the entire building. They burned sage, recited prayers, and created protective barriers with salt and herbs. As they performed the rituals, the atmosphere in the building seemed to shift. The air felt lighter, and the shadows no longer darted in the corners. The whispers faded into silence, replaced by a newfound sense of calm. Days turned into weeks, and Samantha cautiously began to believe they had succeeded. The restless spirits, drawn to Samantha's unresolved past, had finally found peace. She thanked Mrs. Hawthorne profusely for her help, grateful for her wisdom and guidance. As time passed, Samantha felt lighter, freer than she had in months. She resumed her daily routines with renewed vigor, no longer haunted by the specters of her past. With Jack by her side and Mrs. Hawthorne's words of wisdom echoing in her mind, Samantha embraced each day with gratitude and hope for the future. The old house and its secrets were now distant memories, lessons learned in the journey of confronting fears and finding inner strength. Samantha knew she would carry those experiences with her always, a reminder of the power of courage and resilience in the face of the unknown.